Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to take you on a journey through the wonderful world of wine today. But this isn't just about wine tasting or knowing what to order at dinner. It's about using wine as a tool for deeper connection, relationship building, and enhancing client engagement. My name is Ole. I have worked in multiple companies and currently working at Google. I like learning about wine and recently passed wine exam called WSET2 and on my way to the next certification. You might be wondering, why wine? Well, wine is more than just a drink. It's a bridge between history, culture, agriculture, and travel. It's a universal language that crosses industries and cultures, and understanding it can be a real advantage in the business world. In the next hour or so, we'll dive into some fascinating aspects of wine, including how it's made, how to taste it like a pro, and most importantly, how to use your wine knowledge to build stronger relationships in a professional setting. Whether you're hosting a dinner, giving wine as a gift, or navigating a wine menu at a client event, this course will equip you with the skills to do it confidently. By the end of our session, you'll be able to impress clients and colleagues with more than just your business savvy. You'll also be able to confidently select and talk about wine in ways that enhance your interactions and leave a lasting impression. So, grab a glass and let's get started. Let's talk about why knowing a bit about wine can be a secret weapon when it comes to networking. Sure, wine might not seem like the first thing to master for business success, but it's more powerful than you think. Wine isn't just a drink. It sits right at the intersection of history, agriculture, and travel. It's a universal conversation starter that can create meaningful connections and make you memorable. Let's explore why wine knowledge is such a game changer in networking. What makes wine so unique is that it's more than just a drink. It's an experience that blends history, agriculture, and travel. When you talk about wine, you're touching on centuries-old traditions, the art of grape growing, and the world's most beautiful regions. Wine has been part of human culture for thousands of years. From ancient Roman vineyards to modern-day Napa, wine history offers endless talking points. It's also an agricultural product, with the climate, soil, and farming methods shaping the taste of every bottle. People love hearing how the weather one year or the soil in a specific region makes all the difference. And let's not forget travel. Mentioning a wine from Tuscany or Bordeaux not only opens up a wine conversation, but also sparks discussions about travel, culture, and adventure. People connect over shared experiences, and wine is perfect for creating those moments. Whether it's tasting new wines together, talking about favorite regions, or simply enjoying a great bottle at dinner, wine experiences leave a lasting impression. A networking event can blur into the background, but bonding over a unique wine can make the night stand out. When you share a wine moment, people remember you. Wine connects people across cultures. Whether you're talking to someone from France, Italy, Argentina, or California, knowing a bit about wines from different regions can help you bond with clients from around the world. Mentioning a Malbec from Argentina or a Chianti from Tuscany instantly creates common ground, and people love talking about their favorite wines from their home regions. Wine isn't just about sipping, it's about creating connections. Whether you're breaking the ice, bonding over travel and history, or impressing clients with thoughtful selections, wine can make networking easier, more enjoyable, and more memorable. It's not just about what's in the glass, it's about the people you're sharing it with. We're going to start with the basics, understanding where wine comes from. This means learning about the life cycle of a grapevine, the different stages of grape growing, and how factors like climate, soil, and geography affect the final product in your glass. We'll also walk through the winemaking process, covering both still and sparkling wines, so you'll have a better grasp of what's happening behind the scenes before that wine ends up at your dinner table. Next, we'll explore the different styles of wine made from some of the world's most important grape varieties. From light and crisp Sauvignon Blancs to bold and structured Cabernets, you'll learn how to identify these wine styles and what makes each one unique. By the end, you'll be able to recognize the characteristics of the major grape varieties and understand why certain regions are known for specific types of wine. Finally, we'll put everything together with a structured wine tasting. You'll learn how to evaluate wine like a pro, how to look at the wine, smell it to identify aromas, and taste it to assess key elements like acidity, tannins, sweetness, and body. We'll also focus on the finish, or how long the wine's flavors linger. By mastering these steps, you'll be able to confidently assess any wine in a tasting or business setting. By the end of today's session, you'll not only have a solid understanding of how wine is made and what makes each wine unique, but you'll also be equipped to navigate a wine menu and conduct your own wine tastings with confidence. Let's dive in. Here's what we'll be covering today. This course is broken down into 6 key sections that will give you a well-rounded understanding of wine and how you can use that knowledge in business and networking settings. We'll start with a quick look at the fascinating history of wine. From ancient civilizations to modern vineyards, wine has played a major role in culture and society. This context will help you appreciate why wine is so much more than just a beverage. Next, we'll dive into how wine is made. You'll learn the basic processes for both still and sparkling wines, from grape harvesting to fermentation and aging. By the end, you'll understand what goes on in the vineyard and winery before a bottle reaches your hands. Then, we'll look at the main types of wine and the principal grape varieties used to make them. Whether it's Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, or Cabernet Sauvignon, you'll learn the key characteristics of these wines and how they differ depending on where they're grown. Ever feel overwhelmed when reading a wine label? Don't worry. We'll go over how to decode wine labels so that you can confidently pick a great bottle, whether you're in a store, at a restaurant, or choosing for a client dinner. This is where we'll get hands-on. You'll learn how to properly assess wine using a structured approach. Look, smell, taste, and assess the finish. After this, you'll be able to confidently taste and evaluate wines like a pro. Finally, we'll talk about how you can use your wine knowledge in business settings. Whether it's hosting a dinner, choosing a bottle as a gift, or simply breaking the ice at a networking event, understanding wine can be a powerful tool for client engagement. So, by the end of this session, you'll not only understand the fundamentals of wine, but also how to use that knowledge to make a lasting impression in both social and business settings. All right, let's dive into some wine history. This part might sound academic, but I promise it's super interesting, especially when you realize how wine has been a key player in human history for over 8,000 years. Let's start in Georgia, not the state with peaches, but the country in the Caucasus. Yep, Georgia was actually the birthplace of wine. Archaeologists found wine residue on ancient pottery dating back to 6000 BC. Imagine, people were already sipping wine before the wheel was even invented. Now, flash forward to ancient Egypt. Wine played a huge role in their religious ceremonies. They even buried jars of wine with their pharaohs to enjoy in the afterlife. Talk about planning ahead. In 1922, archaeologists found jars of wine in King Tutankhamun's tomb. Who knew the guy loved a good red? Next stop, Greece and Rome. These civilizations really made wine mainstream. In ancient Greece, wine was literally at the center of intellectual life. Philosophers like Plato and Socrates would hold symposiums, which were basically wine-fueled discussions about the meaning of life. A little vino and philosophy, not a bad combo, right? The Romans? They took things a step further. Wherever they went, whether they were conquering France, Spain, or Germany, they planted vineyards. The Romans are responsible for spreading wine culture across Europe. In fact, a lot of the grape varieties we drink today, like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, have roots in Roman viticulture. So next time you're sipping on some fine Burgundy, you can thank Julius Caesar. Fast forward to medieval Europe, and the monks took over. They were the true winemakers of their time. Monasteries in places like Burgundy and Champagne perfected winemaking techniques that we still use today. Fun fact, the famous Dom Perignon, the name behind Champagne, was actually a Benedictine monk. So, monks didn't just pray, they made some pretty excellent bubbly. And now, the wine world is divided into Old World, places like France, Italy, and Spain, and New World, the US, Australia, South Africa, etc. One of the biggest wine shakeups in history happened in 1976 with something called the Judgment of Paris. No, it wasn't about fashion, it was about wine. In a blind tasting, California wines beat out the best of France. The French were stunned, and it totally changed the global wine scene, proving that great wine can come from all corners of the globe. So, why should you care about wine history? Well, understanding this stuff can be a great conversation starter in business settings. You're not just drinking wine, you're sipping on a piece of history. Who knows? Maybe one day you'll find yourself impressing a client by casually dropping that wine was once safer to drink than water in medieval Europe. Now that's a fun fact. Let's talk about how the magic of wine really happens, because it's all about nature, science, and a little bit of luck. Wine is basically a love letter to its environment, or as the French call it, terroir. That's your fancy wine word for the day. Terroir means everything that goes into making a wine taste the way it does: the climate, soil, geography, and more. First up, climate. Wine grapes are a bit picky about where they grow. The ideal spot is between 30 degrees and 50 degrees latitude, both north and south of the equator. It's like the Goldilocks zone for wine: too hot or too cold, and the grapes won't ripen properly. If it's too cold, like further up north in Canada, the grapes can't get enough sun. But too hot, and the grapes can get overripe, making the wine taste a bit too jammy. Sunlight is the MVP here. It helps the grapevine photosynthesize, which is just a fancy word for turning sunlight into grape juice. The more sunlight, the more sugar in the grapes, which means more alcohol in your wine. So a warmer region like California will give you those big, bold, fruity wines. Cooler climates like Germany or the Loire Valley in France give you wines with higher acidity and lighter bodies. Grapes also need water, but not too much. Just like your houseplants, they like to stay hydrated but not flooded. Too much rain and you end up with diluted grapes, making for less flavorful wine. Too little, and the vines stress out, which can be good up to a point. In fact, some winemakers actually encourage a little bit of stress on the vines, because it forces the grapes to concentrate their flavors. It's like wine therapy: no stress, no growth. Now, soil is where things get really interesting. You might not think about dirt when you're sipping wine, but soil is a huge factor in the final flavor. Limestone soils, like those in Champagne and Burgundy, drain well, making the vines work harder to get water. That stress leads to more concentrated, flavorful grapes. In Bordeaux, you've got gravel, which also promotes good drainage, giving us those famous, rich reds. Vineyards near rivers, lakes, or oceans tend to have a bit of an advantage because water bodies help moderate the temperature. Ever notice how a coastal breeze cools you down on a hot day? Well, it does the same for grapevines. Places like Bordeaux, which is close to the Atlantic, benefit from a stable climate thanks to the ocean. That's why wines from coastal areas tend to have balanced acidity and smooth flavors. Finally, let's talk about hills. Yes, hills matter. Vines planted on slopes tend to produce better grapes. Why? First, the water drains away, so the roots don't get waterlogged. Second, the slope allows the vines to catch more sunlight. In fact, some of the world's most famous vineyards are on slopes, like the Mosel Valley in Germany. The steep hills there are perfect for growing Riesling because they soak up all that extra sunlight. So, all these environmental factors, climate, soil, sunlight, water, and geography, combine to create a wine's unique personality. Next time you taste wine, think of it as a reflection of where it came from. And knowing these basics can really help you sound like a pro when chatting with clients or choosing the right bottle for a special occasion. As we look at these two vineyard images, we're seeing two famous wine regions: Mosel on the left and Burgundy on the right. These regions have very different growing conditions, and those conditions have a huge impact on the type of wine produced. Let's break down the key differences. The vineyard on the left is from the Mosel region in Germany, one of the world's top regions for producing Riesling. Here, the steep slopes play a crucial role in grape growing. The Mosel is a cooler climate, so these steep vineyards are angled to catch as much sunlight as possible. The vines are planted on south-facing slopes, which allows them to maximize the sunlight during the growing season, helping the grapes ripen in this relatively cool region. The steep terrain also provides excellent drainage. Excess water runs off quickly, preventing the vines from becoming waterlogged, which is important for healthy root development. One of the unique aspects of Mosel is the river running through it. The Mosel River helps moderate the temperature by reflecting sunlight onto the vines and storing heat, which is then released at night. This creates a more stable microclimate, protecting the vines from extreme cold. The combination of steep slopes, cool climate, and river influence is what makes Mosel Riesling so distinctive. It's known for its bright acidity and delicate floral notes. On the right, we have a vineyard from Burgundy, one of the most renowned regions for producing Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. The growing conditions here are very different from Mosel. Burgundy is famous for its complex soil structure, particularly its limestone and clay soils. These soils drain well but also retain enough moisture to keep the vines healthy during dry periods. The diversity of soils across Burgundy is one reason for the wide range of wine styles you find here. Unlike the steep slopes of Mosel, Burgundy's vineyards are planted on gentle slopes. These slopes still provide good drainage, but the terrain is more even, which impacts vine stress and grape concentration differently than in Mosel. Burgundy experiences more temperature variation, with warm days and cool nights. This diurnal shift helps maintain acidity in the grapes, which is crucial for both Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. The cooler nights slow down ripening, allowing the grapes to develop complex flavors while retaining freshness. The balanced climate and diverse soils in Burgundy create wines with incredible depth and complexity. The region's Pinot Noir, in particular, is prized for its elegance and subtle earthiness. So, while both regions, Mosel and Burgundy, produce world-class wines, their unique growing conditions, from the steep slopes of Mosel to the gentle slopes of Burgundy, influence everything from grape ripeness to acidity levels. These differences are what make the wines from each region so special and distinct. Alright, now that we've covered the environment where grapes grow, let's talk about how a grape goes from a tiny bud to the glass in your hand. This is the grape's life story, and it's more dramatic than you might think. So, first up, we've got the dormancy phase, which is basically the grapevine's version of hibernation. It starts in late autumn and goes through winter. The vines look dead, but they're actually resting and storing energy for the big growth spurt in the spring. Think of it like the grapevine's version of a power nap. Now, in early spring, temperatures start to warm up, and we get bud break. This is when those tiny buds on the vines start to swell and open, revealing the first green shoots. It's kind of like the grapevine's hello world moment. This phase is super important because these shoots are what will eventually turn into the grapes. But it's also risky because if there's a late frost, it can damage the buds and ruin the whole season. Talk about high stakes. About 40 to 80 days after bud break, we move into the flowering phase. This is where things start to get romantic. Self-pollination happens, and the flowers form tiny green grapes. These little baby grapes are called berries at this stage. Fun fact: the weather during flowering really matters. Too much rain or wind can mess up the process and lead to fewer grapes. Next, we've got a French word, veraison. This happens in mid to late summer, and it's when the grapes start changing color. For red wine grapes, they go from green to shades of red and purple. For white wine grapes, they get more translucent or golden. It's like the grapes are hitting puberty. During this time, sugars start to build up, and the acidity drops, which means the flavors are really starting to develop. After veraison, the grapes move into the ripening phase. This is when the real magic happens. The grapes are now concentrating sugars, balancing out their flavors, and becoming the delicious fruit we're all waiting for. It's a fine balance. If they're picked too early, they'll be too sour, too late, and they can be overly sweet or even raisin-like. Finally, we reach harvest. This can happen any time in early to late fall, depending on the type of wine the winemaker wants to make. The harvest is like the climax of the grape's life. It's when everything the vine has worked for all season comes to fruition. Grapes are picked, either by hand or by machine, and timing is everything. Too much rain right before harvest? Disaster. But get it right, and you're on your way to making a fantastic wine. So, There you have it, the life cycle of a grapevine. It's a delicate process, and every stage matters when it comes to producing the perfect wine. And next time you pour a glass, you'll appreciate just how much work goes into every single grape. You might even find yourself sharing this life cycle story at your next client dinner. Okay, now that we know how grapes grow, let's talk about what happens after they're picked. This is where the winemaking magic happens. Whether you're making red, white, or rose wine, the process is similar, but with some key differences. Let's break it down step by step. The harvest is when the grapes are picked at just the right moment, which can be anywhere from late summer to fall. Timing is everything here. For example, if you want a lighter wine, you'll pick the grapes earlier when acidity is higher. If you want something fuller and richer, you let the grapes ripen a little longer. Next, we move into the crushing stage. This used to be done by foot. Yes, that's right. People would literally stomp on the grapes in big vats. Nowadays, it's mostly done by machines, but it's still a crucial step. The goal is to break open the grape skins to release the juice inside. For white wine, the skins are removed immediately after crushing, but for red wine, they stick around a little longer for fermentation. Picture the famous scene in I Love Lucy where she's stomping grapes. That's pretty much what crushing looked like back in the day. After crushing, we move on to pressing. This is where we really separate the juice from the skins, seeds, and stems. For white wines, this happens right after crushing because we don't want any of the skin color or tannins in the final wine. But for red wines, pressing comes later, after fermentation, because the skins give the wine its beautiful color and those tannins that make your mouth feel dry. Now for the fun part, fermentation. This is where the magic of science comes in. Yeast is added to the grape juice, and it starts eating up the sugars and converting them into alcohol and carbon dioxide. This process can take anywhere from a few days to a few weeks, depending on the wine. And it's not just alcohol that's being created. This is when a lot of the wine's flavors develop. White wines are often fermented at cooler temperatures to preserve their fresh, fruity flavors. Reds? They get a warmer fermentation to bring out those deep, rich flavors. After fermentation, the winemaker has a choice. Do they want to age the wine? If the answer is yes, they'll often age the wine in oak barrels. Oak aging adds extra layers of flavor, think vanilla, spice, or toast, and softens the tannins. Chardonnay is a great example of a wine that can benefit from some time in oak. But not all wines need this. Lighter wines like Sauvignon Blanc are usually bottled right after fermentation to preserve their crisp, fruity flavors. Winemakers often describe oak barrels as seasoning for wine. Just like a pinch of salt can change a dish, oak can totally transform the wine's flavor. Finally, we get to bottling. Once the wine has finished fermentation, and aging if that's part of the plan, it's time to put it in a bottle and seal it up. Some winemakers might even age the wine further in the bottle before it's sold, but most wines are ready to drink once they're bottled. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. The wine is ready to hit the shelves. The biggest difference between making red wine and white wine is the skin contact. Red wines get their color and tannins from fermenting with the grape skins. The longer the skins stay in contact with the juice, the darker and more tannic the wine becomes. White wines, on the other hand, are fermented without the skins, which is why they're lighter in color and don't have that dry, tannic taste. So, that's the still winemaking process in a nutshell. Whether it's red, white, or rosé, each bottle of wine you drink goes through these basic steps. And now that you know how it's made, you'll definitely appreciate that next glass a little more. Alright, now that we've covered still wines, let's talk about the fun stuff. Sparkling wine. Sparkling wines are the party starters, and who doesn't love a bit of bubbly, right? Whether it's champagne, prosecco, or cava, all sparkling wines have something in common: bubbles. But how do those bubbles get there? That's what we're going to explore. It all starts with something called base wine, which is just regular still wine at this point. The base wine can be made from white or red grapes, but it doesn't have the bubbles yet. It's typically quite dry, low in alcohol, and high in acidity. There are two main ways to make sparkling wine, and the method you choose makes a big difference in the final product. Let's break them down. Traditional method, or champagne method. This is the fancy way to do it. It's how they make champagne, cava, and some high-quality sparkling wines in other regions like Franciacorta in Italy. The magic happens during a second fermentation in the bottle itself. Here's how it works. They take the base wine and add some sugar and yeast to it, then bottle it up and seal it with a crown cap, like you'd find on a beer bottle. The yeast starts munching on the sugar, and as it ferments, it produces carbon dioxide, aka bubbles. But because the bottle is sealed, those bubbles get trapped in the wine. After fermentation, the yeast dies off, leaving behind sediment in the bottle. Now, this is where things get interesting. The bottles are gradually tilted and rotated, a process called riddling, so that all the sediment collects in the neck of the bottle. Once that's done, they freeze the neck of the bottle and disgorge it. Basically, they pop the cap off, and the pressure forces the frozen sediment out. A little sugar is often added at this point, depending on how sweet or dry the winemaker wants the final wine to be. Finally, they put on the cork, cage, and voila, sparkling wine. Fun fact: every bottle of champagne is handled about 40 times before it's ready to sell. Now, if you're making Prosecco or Asti, you're probably using the Charmat method. This one is much faster and less labor-intensive than the traditional method, which is why you'll often find these sparkling wines at a more affordable price. Instead of doing the second fermentation in the bottle, it happens in a large, pressurized stainless steel tank. The base wine is mixed with sugar and yeast, and fermentation happens just like in the traditional method. Yeast eats sugar, carbon dioxide is produced, and we get bubbles. The big difference here is that everything happens in a big tank rather than individual bottles. Once the fermentation is done, the wine is filtered to remove the sediment, then bottled under pressure to keep the bubbles in. It's a much faster process, but you still get those fun, fizzy bubbles. Here's a cool tidbit. Prosecco has become so popular that it now outsells champagne. It's the go-to for casual sparkling wine lovers because it's lighter, fruitier, and easier on the wallet. In the traditional method, that whole process of removing the sediment from the bottle is called disgorgement. It's kind of like a quick surgical procedure where the winemaker removes the unwanted bits without losing too many bubbles. It's a delicate operation, but one that's super important for keeping that wine clear and beautiful. In the Charmat method, after the second fermentation is done in the tank, the wine is bottled under pressure, which helps preserve those bubbles. This method keeps the wine fresh and fruity, perfect for a casual sparkling like Prosecco. So now you know. Whether it's the slow and steady traditional method or the quicker, more efficient Charmat method, both paths lead to delicious sparkling wines. Next time you pop open a bottle of champagne or Prosecco, you can impress your friends or clients with all this bubbly knowledge. Let's dive deeper into sweet wines and dessert wines. These wines are all about balance and indulgence. They can be enjoyed with desserts, but some are so versatile that they work beautifully on their own, or even with savory dishes like cheese. So let's explore the world of sweet wines and why they're more than just after-dinner drinks. First up, we have late harvest wines. These are made from grapes that are left on the vine longer than usual, allowing them to become overripe and super sweet. The extra time in the sun concentrates the sugars in the grapes, which makes the final wine rich and sweet. This method is common in places like Germany, where you'll find wines labeled Spätlese, meaning a latte harvest, or Auslese, which are even sweeter. These wines have a beautiful sweetness balanced by high acidity, making them perfect for sipping with fruity desserts or soft cheeses. Late harvest wines are like nature's candy. You've got to have a lot of patience to make them, but the reward is a wine that's packed with rich, fruity flavors. Now, this one might sound odd, but hear me out. Noble rot, or botrytis, is a type of fungus that winemakers actually love. Under the right conditions, misty mornings and sunny afternoons, this fungus grows on the grapes and punctures tiny holes in them, causing them to lose water and concentrate sugars. The result? A deliciously sweet and complex wine. The most famous examples of wines made from noble rot are French Sauternes and Hungarian Tokaji. These wines are rich, honeyed, and packed with complex flavors. They're absolutely divine with blue cheese, foie gras, or even just on their own. Noble rot is literally winemaking magic. What starts as a fungus turns into liquid gold in the glass. It's like transforming a pumpkin into a carriage, but for wine lovers. Next, we have ice wine, or Eiswein if you're in Germany. This is one of the coolest ways to make sweet wine, literally. The grapes are left on the vine until they freeze, and then they're harvested and pressed while still frozen. This process separates the sugar-rich juice from the water, creating a super sweet and concentrated wine. Ice wine is popular in Canada and Germany, and it's full of vibrant flavors like tropical fruits, peaches, and honey. It's great with fruit-based desserts, or you can even enjoy it on its own. It's that good. Ice wine is a labor of love. Grapes are often harvested at night in freezing temperatures to get the perfect juice. It's hard work, but totally worth it for the intense sweetness. Lastly, let's talk about fortified wines like port or sherry. These wines start out like any other, but during fermentation, the winemaker adds a spirit, usually brandy, to stop the process and leave some natural sugars behind. This also boosts the alcohol content, making fortified wines a bit stronger. Port is famous from Portugal and is rich, sweet, and perfect with chocolate or cheese. Sherry, on the other hand, comes from Spain and can range from sweet to dry. Sweet sherries, like Pedro Jimenez, are like drinking liquid raisins and pair amazingly with caramel or anything sugary. The British love port so much they even have a tradition of passing the port bottle to the left at formal dinners. Don't break the chain, or you'll be in trouble. So, sweet and dessert wines aren't just an afterthought. They're a huge part of the wine world, and there's a ton of variety in how they're made. From late harvest to ice wine to fortified wines, there's a sweet wine out there for every taste and occasion. Whether you're pairing them with dessert or enjoying them solo, sweet wines are a delicious way to end a meal, or to start a new one. Alright, let's sum up 5 major wine styles you'll encounter. First up, the classic red wine. It's made from black grapes, and what gives it that deep, rich color is the grape skins. Red wines can range from light and fruity to bold and intense. You've got your lighter reds like Pinot Noir, which is basically the ballerina of wines, elegant and light on its feet. And then you've got your full-bodied powerhouses like Cabernet Sauvignon, which is like a linebacker, bold and strong with loads of tannins. Those tannins give you that dry feeling in your mouth, which is why reds are so good with fatty meats like steak or lamb. Red wine can even be made from white grapes if you keep the skins in the mix. It's all about the skin contact. Remember that from the previous slides? Next up, white wine. White wines can be made from white grapes or even black grapes if you remove the skins right away. That's why they don't have that tannic bite like reds. White wines are all about freshness and zing. Take Sauvignon Blanc, for example. It's like biting into a green apple on a crisp autumn day. Or Chardonnay, which can be anything from citrusy and clean to rich and buttery, depending on whether it's aged in oak or not. White wines pair beautifully with seafood, salads, or anything light and zesty. Chardonnay is the shapeshifter of wines. It can be light and crisp or rich and creamy depending on how it's made. So if someone says they don't like Chardonnay, it's just because they haven't met the right one yet. Now, let's talk about Rose, the Instagram darling of the wine world. It's made from black grapes, but the skins only hang out with the juice for a short time, which gives it that gorgeous pink color. Rose is the ultimate versatile wine. It's like a summer breeze in a glass, light, fruity, and perfect for warm days. But it's not just a casual wine. Rose can hold its own with food, pairing beautifully with grilled veggies, seafood, or even a nice charcuterie board. Rose has been around for centuries. It's not just a modern trend. Some of the earliest wines ever made were likely rose because winemakers didn't have the technology to make deep reds yet. Of course, we can't leave out sparkling wine. Whether you're popping a bottle of champagne or pouring a glass of Prosecco, these wines are all about the bubbles. Sparkling wines are perfect for celebrations, but they're also incredibly food-friendly. Dry sparkling wines, like Brut Champagne, are perfect as an aperitif, while sweeter styles, like Asti, are great with dessert. And don't forget, Prosecco is your go-to for brunch mimosas. Fun fact, true champagne only comes from the Champagne region in France. Everything else is just sparkling wine. So next time you order champagne, make sure it's the real deal if you're going fancy. Finally, we've got dessert wines, also known as the grand finale of the wine world. These are made using methods like late harvest, noble rot, or fortification, and they're all about sweetness. Dessert wines can be light and floral like Moscato, or rich and intense like Port or Sauterne. They're amazing with desserts like fruit tarts or chocolate, but they're also fantastic with savory dishes like blue cheese. Dessert wines are like the world's most indulgent treat. Some even call port liquid velvet, which sounds about right when you're sipping it with a rich chocolate cake. So, whether you're sipping a bold red, a crisp white, or a refreshing rose, there's a wine style for every occasion. Knowing the basics of these styles helps you confidently choose the perfect wine for a meal, an event, or just relaxing after a long day. Let's talk about what you can expect when you open a bottle of wine. Whether it's a big, bold red or a light, crisp white, understanding a wine's body and flavor profile will help you know exactly what's in the bottle before you even taste it. So what does body mean, and how do things like acidity and tannins play into your wine experience? On the slide, you can see main grape varieties sorted from lower to higher body. It should help you understand at least how bold the wine can be. Let's talk more about what wine body is. When we talk about a wine's body, we're talking about how heavy or light it feels in your mouth. A good way to think of it is like comparing milk. Light-bodied wines are like skim milk, medium-bodied wines are like whole milk, and full-bodied wines are like cream. Light-bodied wines are the wines that feel delicate and refreshing. They usually have lower alcohol content and higher acidity. Think Pinot Grigio, Riesling, or Beaujolais. These wines are great for sipping on a hot day or pairing with lighter meals like salads or seafood. If you're at a summer wedding, the light-bodied wines are probably the ones keeping everyone cool and refreshed on the dance floor. Next, we've got the Goldilocks of wines, medium-bodied. These wines are a perfect balance, not too heavy, not too light. Think Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc, or a lighter style of Zinfandel. Medium-bodied wines are super versatile and work well with a wide range of foods. Medium-bodied wines are like your favorite pair of jeans. They work for almost every occasion. Full-bodied wines are the big, bold ones that coat your mouth and stick around a bit longer. They usually have higher alcohol content, more tannins, and deeper flavors. Think Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, or Chardonnay that's been aged in oak. These are the wines you want to pair with rich, hearty meals like steak or lasagna. Full-bodied wines are like that friend who walks into a room and makes their presence known right away. You can't miss them, and they make a big impression. Now that we've talked about wine styles, let's get to the stars of the show, the grapes. Just like different coffee beans make different brews, different grape varieties produce totally different wines. Understanding a few key grape varieties will help you figure out what you like and make better wine choices. Chardonnay is like the chameleon of the wine world. It can be lean and crisp or rich and buttery, depending on how it's made. If it's unoaked, you'll get fresh flavors like green apple and lemon. If it's aged in oak, you'll taste more tropical fruits, vanilla, and butter. Chardonnay is grown everywhere, from Burgundy in France to California. It's super versatile and pairs well with all kinds of dishes. Try it with roast chicken, creamy pasta, or seafood. Chardonnay is the grape behind some of the world's most famous wines, like white Burgundy and Champagne. So if you think you're not a Chardonnay fan, you might just not have met the right one. Sauvignon Blanc is like a wake-up call in a glass. It's zesty, fresh, and herbaceous. You'll taste things like lime, green apple, and sometimes a grassy note. It's grown all over the world, but some of the best examples come from the Loire Valley in France and New Zealand. Sauvignon Blanc pairs beautifully with goat cheese, light seafood, or anything with a bit of green. Think salads and fresh herbs. Ever heard of Sancerre? That's Sauvignon Blanc from the Loire Valley, and it's one of the best expressions of this zippy grape. Riesling is a real crowd pleaser. It can be bone dry, off dry, or sweet, but no matter the style, it's always got that zingy acidity that makes your mouth water. You'll get flavors like lime, green apple, and sometimes a petrol note as it ages, which is way tastier than it sounds. Riesling is amazing with spicy food, especially Thai or Indian dishes. The sweetness balances out the heat, making it a perfect match. Riesling is known for its ability to age. Some Rieslings can age for decades and develop these incredible honeyed and nutty flavors while still keeping that signature acidity. Pinot Grigio and Pinot Gris are two sides of the same grape. If it's called Pinot Grigio, you're usually getting a light, crisp, easy-drinking wine. Think citrus and green pear. But if it's called Pinot Gris, especially from Alsace, it's likely to be richer, with more honeyed and spiced notes. Pinot Grigio is perfect for a casual lunch or sipping at a summer barbecue, while Pinot Gris pairs well with more substantial dishes like creamy pastas or roast chicken. Whether it's Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris, this grape is one of the most popular whites in the world, especially for those who like their wine light and easygoing. Let's move to the red grapes. Cabernet Sauvignon is the king of red wines. It's bold, full-bodied, and packed with flavors like blackcurrant, cedar, and tobacco. It's got a lot of tannins, which makes it great for aging, and it pairs perfectly with big, rich dishes like steak or lamb. Cabernet Sauvignon is grown everywhere, but the most famous examples come from Bordeaux in France and Napa Valley in California. Cabernet Sauvignon is often blended with Merlot to soften its tannins, which is exactly what happens in Bordeaux blends. It's like the dynamic duo of the wine world. Merlot is the smooth operator of red wines. It's juicy, soft, and easy to drink, with flavors of plum, black cherry, and a little bit of herb. It's less tannic than Cabernet Sauvignon, which makes it a great intro to red wines for beginners. Merlot pairs well with roasted meats, hearty stews, and even burgers. It's super versatile and very approachable. Merlot gets a bad rap sometimes, but it's one of the most planted grapes in the world. Some of the most expensive wines in Bordeaux are made mostly from Merlot. Pinot Noir is light, elegant, and a little bit mysterious. It's known for its bright red fruit flavors like cherry and raspberry, along with earthy notes like mushroom and forest floor. Pinot Noir is super smooth, with silky tannins and high acidity. This grape thrives in cooler climates like Burgundy, Oregon, and New Zealand. It's a dream with food, especially dishes like roast chicken, salmon, or mushroom risotto. Pinot Noir is notoriously difficult to grow because it's sensitive to everything, weather, soil, you name it. But when it's done right, it creates some of the world's most elegant and expensive wines. Syrah, or Shiraz if you're in Australia, is a bold, spicy grape with flavors of blackberry, black pepper, and sometimes smoky, savory notes. It's full-bodied and rich, making it perfect for pairing with barbecued meats or hearty dishes. In France, Syrah is the star of the Northern Rhone, where the wines tend to be more restrained and elegant. In Australia, Shiraz is big, bold, and full of juicy fruit flavors. Knowing your grape varieties is like having a cheat sheet for wine. Each grape brings its own personality to the glass, and once you get to know them, you can confidently choose wines that match your taste or complement your meal. Plus, it's always fun to impress your friends by dropping some grape knowledge at your next dinner party. Let's face it, reading a wine label can feel a bit like decoding a secret message, but once you know what to look for, it's actually pretty simple, and it'll help you make more informed choices when buying or ordering wine. So, let's break down the key things to look for on a wine label, whether you're picking a bottle in a store or ordering from a wine list. First, you've got the producer's name. This is essentially who made the wine. Big-name producers can give you an idea of quality and style, but don't overlook smaller, lesser-known names. Sometimes those hidden gems are the best discoveries. Think of the producer like a brand. If you know you love Louis Jadot or Mondavi, for example, it's like sticking with your favorite clothing brand. You kind of know what to expect. Next is the region or appellation. This tells you where the grapes were grown, which is super important because geography plays a huge role in how a wine tastes. In the Old World, pretty much all Western Europe, wines are often labeled by region rather than grape variety. So if you see Bordeaux, you know you're probably getting a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. If it says Chablis, you're getting a Chardonnay. The idea is that the region is famous for growing certain types of grapes, so they assume you'll know what's in the bottle. In the New World, USA, Australia, etc., it's the opposite. The label usually tells you the grape variety first. If it says Chardonnay from California, you know exactly what you're getting, regardless of the specific region. The region is like the wine's hometown. Just like how different cities have different vibes, wines from different regions have their own unique characteristics. Now, this is where you get to the heart of the matter, the grape variety. In New World wines, the grape variety is front and center. If it says Pinot Noir, you're getting Pinot Noir. Easy. For Old World wines, you have to know a bit more about the region to figure out the grape. For example, if you see Sancerre, that's Sauvignon Blanc, Chianti means Sangiovese, and Rioja is mostly Tempranillo. Think of the grape variety like the lead actor in a movie. It's what gives the wine its personality, from zesty Sauvignon Blanc to big, bold Cabernet. The vintage is the year the grapes were harvested. It can give you clues about how the wine might taste. For instance, older vintages tend to be more complex and developed, while younger wines are typically fresher and more vibrant. Vintage also matters when it comes to weather. A hot year might produce a richer, fruitier wine, while a cooler year could lead to something more acidic and fresh. Think of vintage like a time capsule. What was happening in the world and the weather that year shows up in the bottle. It's why some years are more collectible than others. Next, you'll see the alcohol by volume, usually listed as a percentage. A higher ABV, 14% or more, generally means a fuller-bodied wine with more intense flavors, while a lower ABV, around 11 to 12%, indicates a lighter, more refreshing wine. If you're planning a long, leisurely dinner, you might want to go for a lower ABV wine to keep the conversation flowing without anyone getting too tipsy too fast. Some labels also include classification terms that give you a sense of quality. For example, in France, you might see Grand Cru or Premier Cru, which means the wine comes from top-tier vineyards. In Italy, you might see DOC or DOCG, which are quality classifications ensuring the wine meets certain regional standards. These classifications are like Michelin stars for wine. They don't guarantee you'll love it, but they're a sign that extra care was taken in making the wine. Some labels include extra details like how long the wine was aged or what type of barrels were used, oak, stainless steel, etc. Oak aging can give a wine more richness and complexity, adding flavors like vanilla or spice, while stainless steel preserves fresh, fruity flavors. Anecdote: oak aging is like adding seasoning to a dish. It gives the wine those extra layers of flavor. A Chardonnay aged in oak will taste buttery and rich, while one made in stainless steel will be fresh and zesty. So, reading a wine label doesn't have to feel like decoding hieroglyphics. Once you know the key parts, who made it, where it's from, what grape is in it, and the vintage, you've got a pretty good idea of what to expect. Next time you're browsing a wine list or a bottle shop, you'll feel way more confident in making your choice. Alright, now that we know how to read a label, let's move on to the real-life challenge of navigating a wine menu. Whether you're at a restaurant or a business dinner, choosing wine can feel intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. I'm going to give you a few easy tips to make sure you order like a pro, impress your colleagues, and find the perfect wine to pair with your meal. First, when in doubt, look for familiar grape varieties. If you know you like Chardonnay, Merlot, or Pinot Noir, scan the menu for those varieties. Most wine lists will have popular grapes listed, especially for New World wines. If the menu lists regions instead of grapes, don't panic. You can apply what you've learned about Old World regions. For example, if you love Sauvignon Blanc, look for wines from Sancerre or Puy-Fume, both from France. For bold reds like Cabernet Sauvignon, check out Bordeaux or Napa Valley options. Wine menus usually list wines by price, and sometimes the temptation is to go straight for the highest or lowest. The second cheapest wine is often what everyone orders because no one wants to look cheap. Instead, focus on your preferences. But don't fall for the second cheapest wine trap. You're probably paying for the fact that everyone else is ordering it, not necessarily the best value for your money. Mid-range options are usually a safe bet. These wines tend to offer good quality without breaking the bank. If you're in a group, you can always ask if people want to split a nicer bottle and upgrade a bit. If you're at a restaurant with a sommelier or knowledgeable server, don't be afraid to ask for their recommendations. They know the wine list inside and out and can suggest a great bottle based on your budget and taste. You can even give them clues about your preferences. If you love fruity reds or crisp whites, let them know. Sommeliers love helping people find the perfect wine. Think of the sommelier as your personal wine tour guide. They want you to have a great experience, so don't hesitate to ask for advice. It makes you look more knowledgeable, not less. Finally, let's talk about when to order sparkling or dessert wine. This is always a great option if you're celebrating something, whether it's a work achievement or a birthday. Champagne or Prosecco is also perfect as an aperitif before the meal, or as a light, refreshing wine for the entire dinner. At the end of a meal, consider ordering a dessert wine like Port, Sauterne, or Moscato. These wines are sweet and rich, perfect for pairing with dessert, or as a little treat to sip on as you wind down the evening. Sparkling wine is like the confetti of the wine world, light, fun, and perfect for celebrations. Dessert wine? That's your rich, indulgent nightcap. And it's the perfect way to wrap up a great dinner. Navigating a wine menu doesn't have to be stressful. Once you know what to look for, familiar grapes, good food pairings, and when to ask for help, you can order with confidence. The next time you're out with friends, colleagues, or clients, you'll be the one everyone looks to for wine recommendations, and you'll nail it every time. But apart from the wine menu itself, it is important to consider what you will be eating together with wine. That is why let's talk about pairings basics. Okay, so you got your wine on the table. Now the task is to assess it. The best way to do it is in a step-by-step, structured way. Let's start with the first step, looking at the wine. The color, clarity, and the legs, those streaks you see running down the inside of the glass after swirling, all tell you a lot about the wine before you even taste it. For white wines, the color ranges from pale yellow to gold. A paler color usually means it's young and fresh, while a deeper gold could signal that it's aged or maybe oak-aged. For red wines, the color can range from ruby red to deep purple. Lighter reds like Pinot Noir tend to be more ruby, while fuller-bodied wines like Syrah or Cabernet Sauvignon are deeper and more intense in color. Wine legs. The remaining wine on the sides of the glass can hint at alcohol content or sweetness. The slower and thicker the legs, the higher the alcohol or sugar content in the wine. It does not show how good the wine is, however. Next, we smell the wine. This is where the wine really starts to show its personality. Swirl the wine to release the aromas, and then take a sniff. Primary aromas that come directly from the grape itself, things like fruit and floral notes. For whites, you might pick up citrus, apple, or tropical fruits like banana and pineapple. For reds, common aromas include berries like strawberry, blackberry, and cherry. A wine once reminded me of a fresh summer day in an orchard. Those primary aromas are often the most memorable and instantly recognizable. Next, you have secondary aromas, which come from how the wine was made. If it was aged in oak, you might smell things like vanilla, spices, or even toast. These aromas give the wine complexity and depth. I had a Chardonnay once that smelled like buttered toast with a hint of vanilla. Those oak barrels really worked their magic. Finally, if the wine has aged, you might pick up tertiary aromas. These are the earthy, deep scents like leather, tobacco, or dried fruits. These come from the aging process and give the wine more maturity. I once had an older red wine that smelled like an old leather bookshop. Those tertiary aromas can really transport you. Now for the fun part, tasting the wine. Here, you're looking for several key elements. Does it make your mouth water? That's acidity, which is usually more prominent in whites or lighter reds like Pinot Noir. Wines with high acidity feel refreshing and crisp. In red wines, you'll notice the tannins, which give structure. They can make the wine feel drying, especially around your gums, or they can be soft and smooth, like in an aged wine. Is the wine dry, off-dry, or sweet? Even if it's not a dessert wine, there could be a touch of sweetness, especially in some whites. Finally, think about the body of the wine, how light or heavy it feels in your mouth. Is it light like a Sauvignon Blanc, or rich and full-bodied like a Cabernet Sauvignon? The first time I tried a high-acid wine, I wasn't expecting it to feel like biting into a Granny Smith apple. It was so mouth-watering. That's the power of acidity. Lastly, let's talk about the finish. After you swallow, how long does the flavor linger? This is often a sign of complexity and quality. A short finish means the flavor fades quickly, usually less than 5 seconds. Simple wines tend to have short finishes. A long finish can last over 12 seconds, which indicates a more complex and higher quality wine. The flavors linger, almost like the wine is giving you an encore. The best wines leave a lasting impression, not just on your palate, but in your memory, like the encore after a great concert. So that's a quick breakdown of structured wine tasting. Look, smell, taste, and assess the finish. Following these steps will give you a deeper appreciation of every glass of wine you enjoy, whether you're casually tasting at home or impressing clients at a dinner. Why? Alright, now let's take a deeper dive into how food characteristics affect the way a wine tastes. Whether you're pairing wine with a sweet dessert, a salty snack, or a spicy dish, the characteristics of the food can change how the wine feels and tastes in your mouth. Let's break it down with a few key food characteristics and how they interact with wine. When you're pairing wine with sweet food, think desserts or even glazed meats, the sweetness can make the wine seem more drying and bitter. It also boosts the perception of acidity in the wine and reduces its sweetness and fruity flavors. Pair sweet food with a wine that's at least as sweet as the dish, if not sweeter. Dessert wines like Sauternes or Port work beautifully because their sweetness balances the dish, keeping the wine from tasting too harsh. A rich chocolate cake with a sweet ruby port is a classic pairing because the wine's sweetness holds up to the dessert, and the wine's bold flavors don't get overwhelmed. Foods high in umami, savory foods like mushrooms, soy sauce, or aged cheeses, can have a similar effect to sweet foods. They make the wine seem more bitter, more acidic, and less sweet and fruity. Go for wines with lower tannins and higher acidity to balance out the savory richness. Something like a Pinot Noir or Champagne works well because the acidity cuts through the umami and lifts the flavors. Earthy mushroom risotto with a light, elegant Pinot Noir is a match made in heaven because the wine's acidity balances the umami, and its fruity notes complement the dish. Umami-rich dishes like soy sauce are often a nightmare for high-tannin reds. Suddenly, that smooth wine feels like sandpaper in your mouth. Here's where things get fun. Salty foods, think chips, fries, or seafood, make wine taste less drying and bitter. They also reduce the perception of acidity and make the wine feel fuller and fruitier. Pair salty foods with high-acid wines to create balance. Champagne and Chablis are perfect with salty foods like oysters or fried snacks because the wine's acidity cuts through the salt, while the salt makes the wine taste even fruitier. A salty charcuterie board with a glass of crisp champagne or a salty cheese with a bright Sauvignon Blanc is a foolproof pairing. This is why salty snacks and wine are so addictive. Once you start pairing them, the wine just keeps tasting better and better. Foods with high acidity, like tomatoes or citrus, actually make wine seem less acidic, which brings out more of the wine's sweet and fruity notes. Pair acidic food with an equally acidic wine to keep things balanced. If the food is more acidic than the wine will taste flat. A fresh Sauvignon Blanc or Chianti is perfect with dishes like pasta in tomato sauce or ceviche. Tomato-based pasta with a glass of Chianti is a classic Italian pairing. The acidity in both the wine and the dish creates harmony, while the fruity notes in the wine shine through. Acid loves acid. Pairing a crisp Sauvignon Blanc with a lemony seafood dish is like squeezing fresh lemon over your food. Everything just pops. If you're serving a dish that's highly flavored, like something with strong spices or lots of bold herbs, it can easily overwhelm the wine, making it taste dull or washed out. Choose a wine that's equally bold to match the intensity of the dish. Wines like Zinfandel or Shiraz can stand up to big, flavorful dishes like barbecue or grilled meats. A smoky BBQ rib with a bold, peppery Shiraz is a knockout pairing because the wine's intensity holds its own against the strong flavors. Bold foods need bold wines. If you try pairing something like a delicate Pinot Noir with a big, spicy barbecue dish, the wine will get totally lost. Fatty or oily foods, like fried chicken or creamy pasta, make wine seem less acidic. That's why you need a high-acid wine to cut through the richness and refresh your palate. Pair rich fatty foods with wines that have high acidity, like Chablis or Champagne. These wines will slice through the richness and cleanse your palate after each bite. Creamy fettuccine. Alfredo with a glass of zesty Chablis is a perfect pairing because the wine's acidity cuts through the richness of the sauce. Ever notice how fried foods taste amazing with champagne? That's the acidity in the bubbles working overtime to keep your palate fresh. Finally, we have spicy foods, think chili or hot curry, which can increase the perception of heat in the dish and make the alcohol in the wine feel even stronger. Pair spicy food with wines that are low in alcohol and slightly sweet, like an off-dry Riesling or Gewürztraminer. The sweetness helps balance the heat, and the lower alcohol content keeps the spiciness from getting too intense. A spicy Thai curry with a slightly sweet Riesling is an ideal pairing because the sweetness calms the heat, while the wine's bright acidity keeps things fresh. If you ever wonder why a bold Cabernet tastes so harsh with spicy food, it's because the alcohol and tannins just turn up the heat, so it's best to go with something cool and sweet instead. Pairing wine with food is all about balance. By paying attention to the food's characteristics, whether it's sweet, salty, acidic, or spicy, you can choose a wine that complements or contrasts with those flavors in just the right way. Remember, it's all about enhancing both the wine and the dish, and when you get it right, the combination can be truly magical. Let's summarize everything in a wine pairing cheat sheet. One of the simplest rules in wine pairing is to match the weight of the wine with the weight of the food. Light dishes, like salads or seafood, work best with light wines. For example, a Sauvignon Blanc with a fresh salad is like a refreshing breeze. It lifts the flavors without overpowering them. On the other hand, rich, bold dishes like steak or lamb need wines with a bit more muscle. A Cabernet Sauvignon with steak is a perfect example. Those tannins in the wine cut right through the richness of the meat and create an amazing balance. Acidity in wine is like salt in food. It's what brightens and enhances the flavors. High-acid wines like Champagne or Sauvignon Blanc are fantastic with rich, fatty foods because they cut through the heaviness and keep your palate refreshed. For example, a Sauvignon Blanc with a buttery pasta dish is a perfect match. The wine's acidity lightens up the richness of the dish. And here's a fun one. Champagne with fried food. The bubbles and acidity act as a palate cleanser, making each bite taste just as good as the first. Wine and cheese are best friends, but not all wines work with all cheeses. For soft, creamy cheeses like Brie or Camembert, go with something crisp and bubbly, like Champagne or a Chablis. The bubbles lift the richness of the cheese, making the whole experience lighter and more balanced. For hard, aged cheeses like Cheddar or Parmesan, you need something bold. Cabernet Sauvignon or Chianti work beautifully here because the tannins match the sharpness of the cheese. A sharp Cheddar with a bold Cab? That's a power couple right there. If you're ever stuck and not sure what to pair, just go with sparkling wine or rose. Sparkling wines like Champagne or Prosecco are super versatile and can go with anything from appetizers to creamy dishes. Rose, on the other hand, is like the Swiss Army knife of wines. It pairs with almost everything. Whether it's salads, seafood, or grilled meats, rose brings a refreshing and fun element to the table. Sometimes the classics are classics for a reason. Red wine and steak, can't go wrong with that. A bold Cabernet Sauvignon with a juicy steak? Perfection. For white wine and seafood, Something like Sauvignon Blanc or Albarino is perfect. These wines have the freshness and zing to complement the delicate flavors of seafood. And if you're not sure what to pair with a charcuterie board, go for Rose. It's light, refreshing, and has just enough body to stand up to the salty meats, cheeses, and pickles. So remember, when pairing wine and food, it's all about balance, matching weight, using acidity to cut through richness, and knowing when to bring out the classics will help you create perfect pairings. And if you're ever in doubt, you can't go wrong with a glass of bubbly or a crisp rose. All right, let's get into how you can use your newfound wine knowledge in business settings. Whether you're at a client dinner, a networking event, or just giving a bottle as a gift, wine can help break the ice, spark meaningful conversations, and even show a level of sophistication and thoughtfulness. Let's look at how wine can give you that extra edge in the business world. Wine is a fantastic icebreaker. If you're at a business dinner and they hand you the wine list, this is your chance to shine. You don't need to be a wine expert, just knowing a little can go a long way. Try something simple like, "I've heard great things about this Chardonnay. Have you tried it?" Or, "This Pinot Noir comes from a small region in Oregon. I've always been curious about wines from there." It shows you're engaged without being overly formal. Wine is like sports. Everyone has an opinion or a favorite, and it's a great way to get people talking. You never know where the conversation will go. When it's your turn to pick the wine for a client dinner, here's how to play it smart. First, keep it neutral. Stick to crowd pleasers like a light Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, or a Pinot Noir. These wines tend to be versatile and pair well with a wide range of dishes. If you're unsure what the table will order, go for a sparkling wine or rosé. These wines are versatile and generally appeal to a wide range of tastes. Imagine you're at a seafood-focused restaurant. A crisp Sauvignon Blanc is a great choice. It's refreshing, pairs well with the food, and shows you know your wine without going too fancy. Don't stress too much about being a wine expert. Most people will be impressed that you made a thoughtful choice. And if you're really unsure, just ask the sommelier. They're there to help. Giving wine as a gift is a classy move, but it's important to get it right. When gifting wine, think about the person's tastes if you know them, or stick to something elegant but safe. For clients, go with something like a well-regarded Cabernet Sauvignon or a good champagne. These are generally well-received and show thoughtfulness without being overly personal. A bottle of champagne is perfect for celebrating a big deal or holiday. It's festive, sophisticated, and universally loved. If you know your client or colleague is into wine, pick something from a region they love, or choose a wine with a story behind it. You could say, "I know you enjoy Italian wines, so I picked up this Chianti from a small family vineyard in Tuscany." Now you're not just giving a gift, you're showing that you've put thought into it. Wine gifts with a little story behind them always stand out. It's the difference between giving someone a bottle and giving them an experience. Wine tasting events are becoming more popular in the business world, especially for client entertainment or team building. These are fun, social, and educational experiences that can leave a lasting impression. If you're hosting, keep the vibe light and interactive. Pick 3, 4 different wines from various regions or styles, maybe a white, a red, a rose, and a sparkling. Give a short, fun introduction to each wine, and let people taste and share their thoughts. No pressure, just enjoyment. If you're attending a tasting, don't feel like you have to analyze the wine like a sommelier. Just share what you like. "I'm really enjoying this Malbec. It's got such rich flavors." And if you're stumped, ask questions. Most people love talking about wine, and it's a great way to engage. Wine tastings are like mini adventures. Each bottle tells a story, and even if you don't know a lot about wine, enthusiasm is contagious. At the end of the day, wine is about connection. Sharing a bottle of wine creates a relaxed atmosphere, whether you're closing a deal, celebrating a milestone, or just having a casual dinner. The key is to use wine as a tool for building rapport. You could ask your client about their favorite wine region or the best wine they've ever had. Sharing wine stories is a great way to create a personal connection without it feeling like work. If you know your client loves French wines, casually drop in. I've been meaning to explore more Burgundy wines. Do you have a favorite producer? Now you're bonding over shared interests. Wine has a way of bringing people together. It's not about the bottle itself, but the experience of sharing it. And in business, those shared moments can turn into lasting relationships. Whether you're hosting a wine tasting, picking a bottle for a dinner, or giving wine as a gift, using wine in business settings isn't about showing off. It's about showing you care. It's a way to connect, celebrate, and build relationships in a relaxed and thoughtful way. And remember, at the end of the day, it's not just about the wine, it's about the people you share it with. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found this course both informative and fun, and that you're feeling more confident in your ability to navigate the world of wine, whether it's choosing the right bottle, pairing it with food, or impressing clients in a business setting. If you'd like to continue the conversation and stay up to date with more wine tips, recommendations, and insights, feel free to follow me on Instagram at LateNightWines. I regularly post wine reviews, pairing ideas, and even behind-the-scenes glimpses of vineyards and tasting events. It's a great way to stay connected and keep learning, even after this course ends. If you ever have any wine-related questions, or just want to share a great bottle you've discovered, don't hesitate to reach out. I love engaging with the community. Thanks again for taking the course, and I hope to see you on social media. Cheers.